Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my lecture series Modern Chess Theory. My name is Genis, I'm a physicist, but one of my hobbies is chess, so I want to offer a lecture series for chess theory. Now this is lecture 1, the history of chess. We will look at the development of chess during the centuries.
It is not really clear how and where the chess game was invented originally. There are several countries in Asia. Besides India, there are China, Persia, and other adjacent countries. But the proper creation of the game might be between the 3rd and 6th century. Then there is the legend of the wheat grain, or sometimes the story is told with rice grains. That makes no difference. And there are some interesting websites where you find a nice calculation. For example, here mathcareers.org UK, the rice and chessboard legend. According to the Persian Ibn Khaldun, he lived from 1211 to 1282. The invention of the chess game goes back to the Brahmin Sisar ibn Dahir. He had invented the game for his king, Shriram, in India. In the game, the king should be the most important figure, but he also wanted to show that the king cannot achieve anything without his subjects, like the peasants, for example. The king was pleased, he liked the game, and so the Brahmin might express a wish. Yeah, he wanted for the first square of the board 1 wheat grain, then for the second 2, for the third square 4, and then for every next square the double number of grains like for the field before. First, the king was annoyed because of that banal wish, but then, he wanted to give him the wheat. It didn't take long as they find out that the whole wheat in the kingdom would not be enough. Mathematically, we can calculate the number of grains which are necessary here. It is a geometrical series, and so we can calculate the number of grains which are necessary up to the last square of the board. So we have this formula here, 1, 1. Q is 2 because we have the factor 2 from one square to the next. We have the double number of grains. N is the number of squares, in this case 64. And so when we substitute that and calculate then the number, then we get here a very big number. This is a number over 18 quintillion. Then a further calculation shows that that would be enough to cover the whole Earth by wheat grains of several millimeters. There's also a page on Wikipedia, Wheat and Chessboard Problem, where you find an illustration of that legend. Researchers tried to trace back the development of the chess game to some predecessor games. Here we have the game Ludo. It was played about from 1500 BC to 600 AD. That game could have influenced the development of chess, perhaps. We have here a picture. We have still an 8x8 board. You can find this board in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Here we have a schematical picture of the board. The rules are not handed down. The sinologist Yang Liansheng, he said it was played by 2 players, of course, with 6 pieces and 6 sticks. We can say the 8x8 board was established in the 6th and 7th century. Then between 531 and 579, that was the period of reign of the Persian king Khosrow I, the Persian poet Ferdowsi, he lived from 940 to 1025, he remarked in his book that a delegation from the ruler of India was visiting the court of Khosrow I, and they gave him a chessboard with pieces as a gift. That is the very first known remark of a game of chess. Then we have Jiangqi, that is a Chinese game. It is also called Chinese chess. That was in 569 as the Chinese emperor, who of northern Zhou wrote the book Jiangjing, book about that Chinese board game. Here we have a picture. Here in the middle, this row should represent a river between the 2 parties here, black and red. There we find the following pieces: marshal or general. That what is corresponding to the today's king in the chess game. And he moves 1 point diagonally. Then guardian or mandarin. It moves 1 point diagonally. It corresponds to the bishop in the today's game. Then the minister or elephant moves 2 points diagonally, similar to the bishop. Then we have a horse or knight, and that's the same movement that we have today with the knight in the chess game. Then a chariot or rook. That is the same like the rook today in the chess game. Then cannon or catapult moves also straightly, the same like the rook. Then we have soldier or pawns. It moves 1 point forward, but after crossing the river they can also move 1 point sideward. And in the early era of this game, the development of that game, Chinese chess, they also used boards with 10 times 10 points. Here we have 9 times 10 points. Here we have the pieces on the crossing points of the lines that reminds us of the Japanese Go, where we put the stones not into the squares but onto the crossing points. Then Jiangqi. The pronunciation is similar, but this is the Korean chess, the Korean version of Chinese chess. Here the difference is that there is no river here in the middle between the 2 parties, and the king or general has a more exposed position here. Then we have Ashtapada. It's an Indian board game. It has been played since about 600. It is also played on an 8x8 board. Here the marked squares here are called castles. The game is for 2 to 4 players. The squares on board at that time had got the same color. We have now alternating colors, black and white here. The players have gotten even number of pieces and they move them around the board clockwise and counterclockwise, like here in the diagram. You start one piece from the right field in the middle here where you are sitting, and then you move around here until you reach the center square. You need a dice, but here we have several versions. Some other wheels are in use with numbers from 1 to 5, for example. Or another possibility to get a random number is to use sticks with 2 colors. To bring a new piece into the game, you must roll a 1 with the dice, and then you put it onto the right middle field that is marked. And then you move according the path that is shown in the diagram before. A piece on a marked square is safe. It cannot be thrown out. If a player reaches a square where there are 1 piece of other players, then the pieces are thrown out. If a piece reaches a square where are more pieces of another player, then the pieces cannot be thrown out. If all the pieces of one player have reached the center field, then you must roll a 1 on the dice again, and with each 1 you can remove 1 piece from the board. The player who has removed his pieces first is the winner. Then we have Ashti-Kashti. There are many different variations of that game, Ashtapada. Ashti-Kashti is the version from Bengal. Here we have the board. It is a 7x7 board, and here you have the same principle. You move around the board to bring your pieces into the center. Then we have Chaturanga. This is supposed as a direct precursor of chess. Here we are in about 625. There were some serious investigations of the historians. Obviously, our chess was developed out of that game called Chaturanga. It was played in India 2500 years ago. Here we have the same number of pieces like in our chess today. The word Chaturanga comes from the Sanskrit. In this language, that means as much as the 4 parts, because the army consisted of 4 parts. There were elephants, war elephants, battle horses, carts, and an infantry. The oldest remark can be found in the text Harshakarita, about 625 to 640. It was written by the Indian court poet Banebhatta at the court of Harsha, which was the ruler over Kanauj from 606 to 647. From India, it is supposed that the game spread it then over Persia. In Persia, the version of that game was called Shatranj, or Arabic Shatranj, the same. In Tibet, Chandaraki, or Cambodian Chatrang. Then about 1000, there exists a source from about 1000 AD from Persia. I had recognized the poet Ferdowsi. He recognized a game named Shatranj in his work Shahnameh, Book of Kings. at that time the pieces had not still the freedom of movement which they have in the today's game. Today, for example, the rook can move as many squares as possible, or the same with the bishop or the queen. In earlier times they could only move one square further. Now here we have a picture of chaturanga. It seems quite similar to our today's chess, but here we have again a board with all the squares in the same color. And here we see elephants instead of the bishop. It's an 8x8 board. And here we have the following pieces. The Raja or king. Then we have the Mantri or Senapati. That is what it is today, the queen. Then the Rata or Sakata, chariot, or our today's rook is the similar figure. Then Gaja or Hastin, that's the elephant, or later called Alfield, and today it is the bishop. Then Asfa, horse or knight. Then Padati or Bata or Sainika. These are the foot soldier or infantry. Today the figure is called pawn. To win a game then, you must bring the other king into a checkmate position. Or if you have reduced the other pieces to only the king, then you have won the game as well. If there are only two kings on the board, then we have a draw. Castling didn't exist. The queen could move one square diagonally, and the rook, chariot, and although the knight or the horse, they moved like in the today's game. The rules for the elephant, the moving rules, were not always the same. In literature there were found different kinds of moving. It was dependent on the region, country. Two squares diagonally, one square forward and one diagonal, two squares straight vertical, horizontal. The pawns, the foot soldier, they moved in principle like today, but they cannot move a double step from the starting position. Here we have a picture of Shatranj, Iran, 12th century. Here we see we have only 8x6 board, obviously. Then the spreading of the game. In the 7th century, the Arabians had contact to that game, Shatranj, as they were conquering other countries. Then the game became very popular among the Arabians, we can say. Then in the 8th century, they brought the game, for example, to Spain, and from here it expanded into whole Europe. The Varangians brought the game from Constantinople to Russia. Here it was played since that 8th century. Before it was already played in Mongolia. We find a big analogy of the chess terminology between the Russian and the Italian one. Then here we have a picture of the chess pieces of the Mongolian chess variation, Mongolian Shatar. About 840, there was the Arabian master player Al-Adli. He lived from about 800 to 870. He wrote a treatise about the game. About 840, there were the earliest chess problems we know. They were created by Caliph Billah of Baghdad. Then around 900, the chess game appeared in the Book of Marvels that was written by Huan Kuei Liu. Then in the 10th century there was the work Kitab Shatranj. It was written by al-Suli. It was obviously the first work about chess strategy. Then about 997 there was the first known work in Europe about chess. That was the book Versus the Scacchis. That's Italian. Here chess was recognized. About 1000 the squares with different colors were introduced. Means we have alternating dark and light squares on the board. Then about 1010 there was a recognition of chess in the Testament of Ermengol I, or also known as Count of Urchel, that was in Western Europe. Then about 1050 there was the very first known German literature about chess, or with chess. It goes back to a monk of the monastery Tegernsee, and he wrote Rotlieb. That was the very first German novel which was written. And here a guest at the king's court shows his abilities in playing chess. Then 1173, here we have the first known notations of a chess game. About 1260 there was probably the first known remark of a female player. It was Macalda di Scaletta. She lived from about 1240 to 1308, that's not sure. Then 1283, the Spanish book Libro de los Juegos was written by Alfonso X. That book contained a great collection of chess problems. At the end of the 13th century, pawns have the possibility to move 2 squares from their starting position. And at the end of the 14th century, the en passant rule was introduced. Then we have exact years. Then in 1422, in a script that was found in Krakow, the stalemate was recognized, and it is said that was a draw. In 1471 then, another script was found, this time in Göttingen, and that was only about chess. Then 1474, there was the first English chess book. The title was The Game and Play of Chess. This is obviously the older writing. This is the correct writing of the title here, with E and here additional E. The author was William Caxton. Then we come to the introduction of the modern rules. It was in 1475 as the first game that was played by modern rules was published. It was published as a poem with the title Scax d'Amour, means Chess of Love. Then in 1493 the Nuremberg Chronicle was published by Hartmann Schädel. In this work, the inventor of chess was mentioned by the philosopher Xerxes. Then about 1500, it was tried to make the game more dynamical, so the moving rules of the pieces were changed, because in earlier times it took very long until interesting complexities formed on the board. The double step of the pawns was already used in the 13th century, though that was at the end of the 15th century, the beginning of the 16th century, as the modern rules were introduced. For example, the today's moves of the queen and bishop were introduced, In earlier times, the pieces could only move one square further, and now bishop, queen, they could move an arbitrary number of squares further. The bishop might move diagonally as far as possible, many squares as well. And so, yeah, the queen was then the strongest chessman in the game. The pawns could be exchanged into another piece when they reach the last row. To win a game, the opponent king must be forced into a checkmate position. The castling was also introduced. That move goes back, perhaps, to the older movement of the king. In earlier times, the king could skip one square and he moved always 2 squares further. And then in the 19th century, the today's rules had pushed through everywhere, we can say. So if we look into a modern chess database where we find many or million of games, then we find that the very first games are dated around 1500, because from that point in time the new rules were used. Okay, few games might be from an earlier date. Now we look at the early chess literature. That was in 1497 as the first printed chess work, including the modern rules, was published. Okay, that means it's the oldest still maintained book. And it goes back to the Spaniard Luis Ramirez Lucena. The title was Repetición de Amores y Arte de Ajedrez con 150 juegos de partido. Here we have Roman numbers, CL. Okay, that means repetition of love and the art of playing chess with 150 games. And here we can find some openings like the Ruy Lopez, the Italian game, the Knight's game, the Bishop's game, King's Gambit, French defense and Scandinavian defense. And in the so-called Göttinger Handschrift, Göttinger script, it was tried to order the chess openings. The name Göttinger script is given by the place. We can find that in the University Library, Göttingen, Germany. Then 1510, the book Scacchia Ludus, that means the game of chess, was written by Marco Girolamo Vida. Yeah, here we have a picture. He lived in Italy from about 1485 to 1566. And in this work, the goddess of chess is remarked. Then 1512, Pedro Damiano, Portugal. He lived from 1480 to 1544. He wrote a chess book with the title Questo libro è da imparare giocare de scacchi e delle partiti. It was published in Rome. There we can find the Damiano defense and the Damiano variation in the Petrov defense. Then 1561, the first reasonable chess textbook was issued. If we look from the modern point of view, that goes back to Ruy Lopez de Segura, Spain. He lived from about 1530 to about 1580. The title was Libro de la Invención Liberal y Arte del Juego del Ajedrez. That means Book of the Free Inventiveness and the Playing Art in Chess. Yeah, picture. In that work, the word gambit is used firstly for some sacrifices in the opening. Then in 1575, the first known championship took place in Madrid, Spain. The participants were the Italians Giovanni Leonardo di Bona and Paolo Boy, and the Spaniards Ruy Lopez and Alfonso Cerón. The winner was Leonardo di Bona. In 1604, the Italian Alessandro Salvio published a book in Naples. He lived from about 1575 to about 1640, and then 30 years later there was a second edition of that book. That edition was extended by 13 chapters of opening theory. And yes, there we can find the Salvio Gambit of the King's Gambit. Yeah, here we have a picture of the book of Salvio. Then between 1620 and 1624, a whole series of articles about chess were published by Gioacchino Greco, Italy, here from about 1600 to 1634. Here we see the Royal Game of Chess play, published in the 1620s. Here we see chess is written with an additional E again. In this work we find the Fool's Maid, the Smothered Maid, and some other opening traps, and the so-called Gioco Piano, that is a variation of the Italian game. In 1634, the book Il Puttino was published by Alessandro Salvio again. It is about Italian chess masters. In 1656, there was a series of handwritings which go back to Greco, and they were printed in England and France some years later in 1669. Greco came from Calabria, so that style of playing of the Italian and Spanish masters was called the Calabrian school. The other kind of playing was a high risky game of sacrifices. Then 1675 we have the book Traité du jeu royal des échecs that was published in Lausanne, France, but the author is unknown. The book is also known under the name Traité de Lausanne, and here the openings are classified systematically. In 1737, the Syrian Philip Stammer, he lived from about 1705 to about 1755, published the book Essai sur le jeu des échecs. Here we have a picture of the book. Here an algebraic notation was used. The book has got two halves. In the first one we find opening theory, and the second one we find endgame theory. Then in 1745, the English translation of Stammer's book was published in England with the title The Noble Game of Chess. Now, the first great masters. We know from the known tradition that the most important chess masters of the 16th and 17th century were the Italians Giovanni Leonardo, Giulio Cesare Polerio, Alessandro Salvio, and Gioacchino Greco. The chess historian Antonius van der Linde was evaluating the games which were recorded by Polerio, and there we find openings like the Italian game, the Two Knights game, Ruy Lopez, the French and the Chilean defense, Queen's Gambit, and the Queen's Pawn game. There were some other openings in the book which were named later, for example the Scotch game, Middle Gambit, Allgaier Gambit, and Adam's Gambit. Then 1744, the French chess player François-André Danican Philidor played 2 simultaneous games blindfolded in Paris. Yeah, the French Philidor lived from 1726 to 1795. And in 1747, Philidor beats Stammer in London. 1763, the chess newscaster was introduced by Sir William Jones, Great Britain. He lived from 1746 to 1794. Then in 1769, the so-called Mechanical Turk was built by Baron Wolfgang von Kempelen, Slovakia. He lived from 1734 to 1804. That wasn't a machine at that time. It wasn't impossible to build chess computers or something like this. It was operated by a very good human player. His name was William Lewis. 1783, there were 3 games blindfolded, played simultaneously by Philidor. Probably Philidor was the strongest player at that time, and he wrote the book L'analyse des échecs, means the analysis of chess. And here we find the famous sentence, "Pawns are the soul of the game." Philidor especially paid much attention to the pawns in the game, but in contrary to Philidor, the best players in Italy, the so-called Modena school, they emphasized an active play of the pieces. There were the masters like Ercole del Rio, he lived from 1718 to 1802, Giambattista Lolli from 1698 to 1769, and Domenico Lorenzo Ponziani from 1719 to 1796. In the 18th century, many clubs were founded, and it was possible to play chess in coffee houses, especially in cities like Paris or London. They became the strongholds of the royal game. Then 1795, we must say the chess development in Germany was lagging behind that of other great countries in Europe like Italy, France, and England or Great Britain. And even in 1795, the very first German textbook was issued by Johann Allgaier. He was German and Austrian. He lived from 1763 to 1823. The title of the book was New Theoretical Practical Instructions to the Chess Game. The German original here had got the title Neue theoretisch-praktische Anweisung zum Schachspiel. Now we come to the 19th century. After Philidor had died, the Italian school gained the upper hand, we can say. One reason was that the English masters published the things of the Italian players in their books. For example, Jacob Henry Sarot from 1772 to 1819, he published a treatise on the game of chess in 1880 and a new treatise on the game of chess 2 years later. Then William Lewis, 1787 to 1870, he published a series of progressive lessons on the game of chess in 1831 and a second series of lessons in 1832. Then George Walker, 1803 to 1879, he published The Art of Chess Play. Then Howard Stanton, from 1810 to 1874, he published The Chess Player's Handbook in 1847 and The Chess Player's Textbook 2 years later, and The Chess Player's Companion in the same year, then 1849. Walker was the first who published a weekly chess column in the London magazine Bell's Live. Yeah, William David Evans was a friend of him. The Evans Gambit is named after him. In 1802, there was the first known American chess book. It was written by J. Humphreys. The title was Chess Made Easy. Then 1813, there was the first chess column by the Liverpool Mercury. How chess reached America is unknown. Yeah, it is assumed that it was brought to America by settlers who traveled into the New World. The first literal source goes back to Benjamin Franklin. He lived from 1706 to 1719. He published a book with the title Morals of Chess. The very first great master from overseas, that was Paul Morphy. He lived from 1837 to 1884. And he especially impressed by his phenomenal power of deduction. Here you have a picture. In France, the next player after Philidor who has to be recognized is probably Louis Charles Marie Labourdonnais. He lived from 1795 to 1840. He published a textbook with the title Traité sur le jeu des échecs in 1833. And he issued the first chess magazine there with the title Palamède, that was issued monthly. Yeah, here we have a picture of Labourdonnais. Then the first tournament in history took place in London. That was in the year 1851. There were 16 international strong players who took part. Yeah, at that time there was no clear regulation of the thinking time the players have. And so there was often the case that a player tried the patience of his opponent, the tournament organizers, and the audience as well, because of a very, very long thinking time. Then 1852, they want to measure now the thinking time, and they used then sand classes. Andrew Cantab proposed a total thinking time for the players of 3 hours. You can find that in the Chess Players Chronicle at that time. Yeah, the next years, in the tournament in London, 1852, some sand clocks were used, and for a player then there were 2 hours thinking time for 20 moves. Yet there were 2 sand clocks in an angle of 90 degrees. Then the advantage was that they could be stopped and started by simple flipping. The most successful player in the middle of the 19th century was Adolf Anderssen. Here we have a picture. Germany, he lived from 1818 to 1879. Yet Germany is not correct, we must say. At that time, Germany we have today was not on the map. We must say that he comes from Prussia. And there were especially 2 games which are famous in the history of chess. Those are the so-called Unmortal game that was from the London tournament in 1851, and the so-called Evergreen game that was played 1 year later in Berlin. Anderssen is seen as the first unofficial world champion. Yeah, with him as the flagship of Germany, Germany gained connection to the leading countries then. Those were England and France. The next is Ludwig Pledow, Germany. He lived from 1795 to 1846. He was a high school teacher in Berlin, and he was the leader of the Berlin Chess Society. In 1846 he published the first issue of Schachzeitung, that means chess newspaper. The Berlin Chess School was established by many very good German players like Rudolf von Bilgur, Tassilo von Hildebrand and der Laser, or Bernhard Horwitz and others. Yeah, here we have Paul Rudolf von Bilgur. He lived from 1815 to 1840. And here we have a picture of Tassilo von Hildebrand and der Laser. He lived from 1818 to 1899. And here we have Bernhard Horwitz. Yeah, first Germany, then he went to Great Britain. He lived from 1807 to 1885. Rudolf von Bilgur began to write a new comprehensive textbook about chess theory. But disadvantageously, he died very early. And so von der Laser continued his work and published that, we must say, milestone of chess literature in 1843. The title was Handbuch des Schachspiels, means Handbook of the Game of Chess. Yeah, picture. It was the most popular chess book, you can say, in the 19th century. And later there was an 8th edition that was later issued by Karl Schlechter. Yeah, the book had got 1040 pages. Yeah, this is a picture of Karl Schlechter, Austria, Hungary. He lived from 1874 to 1918. Next, 1824, there was the first correspondence chess match between Edinburgh and London. And here the so-called Scotch Opening was played often. That's why it is called the Scotch Opening today. Then 1834, there was an international chess match between Alexander MacDonald, Ireland. He lived from 1798 to 1835, and Louis de la Bourdonnais, France. And they played at the Westminster Chess Club in London. 1843, there was another match between Howard Stanton, Great Britain, against Pierre-Charles Fournier de Saint-Amand, France. Stanton was the winner. Here we have a picture of Howard Stanton. He lived from 1810 to 1874. In 1845, there was a corresponding chess competition between London and Portsmouth. And here the telegraph technology was used to transmit the moves. Then 1 year later, 1846, the first German chess magazine was founded. The title Deutsche Schachzeitung means German chess newspaper. In 1849, Nathaniel Cook created the so-called Stanton chess set. Here we have a picture of these often used chessmen. Then 1857, there was the first American Chess Congress. That was a tournament, and the winner was Paul Morphy. Then 1861, there was a competition between Dublin and Liverpool, and they used the transoceanic cables to transmit the moves. In 1867, then mechanical chess clocks were introduced. Then 1870, there was the earliest known tournament in Germany, in Baden-Baden. In 1871, Philippe Ambroise Durand, France, he lived from 1799 to 1880, he published the first book about endgames. The title was Stratégie raisonnée de fin de partie du jeu d'échecs. That means a reasonable strategy of the endings of the game of chess. In 1873, the so-called Neustadel score system, or better known as Sonborn-Burger score, was firstly used. Then in 1874, Antonius van der Linde, Netherlands, 1833 to 1897, he discovered the chess codexes of the Italian master Giulio Cesare Polerio from the 16th century. In 1877, Deutscher Schachbund, means the German Chess Federation, was founded. 1879, in New Zealand, the first chess championship took place. That was the longest running national chess championship of the world. In 1883, the so-called Forsyth Edwards notation was introduced. Then we come to the very first World Chess Championship in 1886. It took place between Wilhelm Steinitz and Genis in the USA. Steinitz was the winner with a score of 12.5 to 7.5 points. So here we have a picture of Wilhelm, later William Steinitz, first Austria, then later USA. He lived from 1836 to 1900. Here we have the challenger, picture of Johannes Zukertort. He was born in Poland, then later lived in Germany and then in Great Britain. He lived from 1842 to 1888. And in 1888, the first international correspondence tournament was carried out. And also in the same year, 1888, there were the first championships of the USA, the national championships. Then 1889, we have the second World Championship. It took place between the title holder, Steinitz, and the challenger, Mikhail Chigorin, Russia. They played in Havana, Cuba. Steinitz won by a score of 10.5 to 6.5 points, so he stayed the world champion. Here we have a picture of Mikhail Ivanovich Chigorin, Russia. He lived from 1850 to 1908. And then 1890 to 1891, they played over the New Year's Day. There was a third World Championship between the defending champion Steinitz and now the challenger was Isidor Gansberg, Hungary, later Great Britain. They played in New York. Steinitz stayed the world champion by a score of 10.5 to 8.5 points. Here we have a picture of the challenger Isidor Arthur Gansberg. He lived from 1854 to 1930. And in 1892, the next World Chess Championship. At that time, it took place again in Cuba, Havana. And Steinitz again defended his title against Chigorin, by a score of 12.5 to 10.5 points. Here the first number is a score of the title defender and the second is the score of the challenger here in the script. And the next, 2 years later, 1894, we have the fifth World Championship. That time in North America, in the cities of New York, Philadelphia, Montreal. And now, Emanuel Lasker became the second official world champion. He took over the title from Steinitz. The score was 7 to 12. Here we have a picture of Lasker, Germany. He lived from 1868 to 1941. Then in 1895, the famous tournament at Hastings took place for the first time, Hastings, England. Yeah, again, over the New Year's Day from 1896 to 1897, the 6th World Championship was in Moscow. Emanuel Lasker defended the title against Steinitz by a clear score of 12.5 to 4.5. In 1899, there was the introduction of the timeout flags of the chess clocks. Then we want to look at the first official world champions. In 1886, Steinitz became the first officially accepted world champion. Yeah, he was analyzing his own games very intensively to learn from his mistakes. There are some guiding principles for the chess game which go back to him. For example, you should let the castling pawns in their original position to not weaken the king's position unnecessarily. And there was a student of Steinitz, Siegbert Tarrasch. Here we have a picture. Germany. He lived from 1862 to 1934. Yeah, many players have learned from his books. There were, for example, 300 Schachpartien, means 300 chess games. Die moderne Schachpartie, the modern chess game. And yeah, the most famous one, das Schachspiel, the game of chess. From him is the guiding principle, rooks belong behind passed pawns. Then in 1894, Emanuel Lasker became the second world champion. He got the title from Steinitz. He kept it for 27 years. Okay, in between there was the First World War. Lasker was a graduated mathematician and he was interested in other games as well, like for example the Japanese Go. Probably he was the first who practiced something like psychological warfare at the chessboard. Yeah, he studied the games of his opponents very extensively. Then 1907, Lasker defeated his title against Frank Marshall, with a very clear score. We have seen that. It was the 7th World Championship. Here we have a picture of Frank Marshall, Frank James Marshall, USA. He lived from 1862 to 1934. And then in 1908, Lasker again defended his world champion title, this time against Tarrasch in Berlin. And Lasker published the book Common Sense in Chess already in 1895. 1910, next World Championship, the 9th one. And again, Lasker stayed the world champion. But it was a very close result, a 5-5 draw. Then 1921, José Raúl Capablanca overtook the World Championship title from Emanuel Lasker. They played in Capablanca's country, Cuba, in Havana. And at that time, it was said Capablanca was playing without mistakes. So, because of that, he got the nickname the Chess Machine. Capablanca had learned playing chess from his father. In 1922, he published his textbook Chess Fundamentals. And later the work Letzte Schachlektionen. Here it is dealt with the treatment of endgames. Obviously there is no English translated version. Here we have a picture of Capablanca, Cuba. He lived from 1888 to 1942. Then 1927 we have the Russian Alexander Alyokhin. He saw chess as a kind of art and chess game as a piece of art. He overtook the world champion title from Capablanca in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The score was 3-6. Relatively clear result. Here we have a picture of Alexander Alexandrovich Alyoshin, first Russia, then later France. He lived from 1892 to 1946. That was still during the match he got the French citizenship. In 1929 he defended the world champion title against Evin Bogolyubov, as they played in several towns in Germany and the Netherlands. The result was 15.5 to 9.5. Alyoshin published some books like On the Road to the World Championship 1923 to 1927 and My Best Games of Chess 1908 to 1937. He dealt with opening theory very intensively. There are several variations in the opening theory that are called after him. Then here we have a picture of the challenger Efim Dmitrievich Bogolyubov, Russia. He lived from 1889 to 1952. In 1934, Bogolyubov was again the challenger of Alyoshin. The games were carried out in some German towns. And Bogolyubov lost again. The score was 15.5 to 10.5. Now we come to the first half of the 20th century. In this time interval there were two world wars. World War I from 1914 to 1918 and World War II from 1939 to 1945. In that time there was no great development of the chess sport. Then 1902 there was a first match of players between two American ships. They transmitted the moves by radio. 1904 it was the foundation of the British Chess Federation, BCF. And in 1905 there was the first national championship for women in Great Britain. In 1907, there was the 7th World Championship. Marshall was the challenger of Lasker, but Lasker won by a score of 11.5 to 3.5. They played in several US-American cities. Next year, 1908, the 8th World Championship. The games were played in Germany, Düsseldorf and Munich. Siegbert Tarrasch was the challenger of Lasker, but Lasker again, he won the match by 10.5 to 5.5 points. Then 1910, next, the 9th World Championship. It was in Vienna and Berlin, and again Lasker could defend his title, but no, with the closest possible result, it was a 5-5 draw. And in the same year, there was José Raúl Capablanca, Cuba, and he was the first who won a major tournament with a score of 100%. That was in New York. And then 1910, the 10th World Championship. It took place in Berlin. Janowski challenged Lasker, but Lasker again could defend his title with a clear result of 9.5 to 1.5 points. In 1911 there was a simultaneous chess event and there were over 100 players. In 1913 H.J.R. Murray published his book A History of Chess. Then 1914, that was before the First World War broke out, Then the title Grandmaster was conferred for the first time. That was by Tsar Nicholas II. There was a tournament in St. Petersburg with many great players of that time, and the title was received by Capablanca, Tarrasch, Aljochin and Marshall. Yet that title has nothing to do with the today's Grandmaster title. The today's title is conferred by FIDE since 1950. Then 1919, Capablanca plays against 39 players simultaneously. That was in the House of Commons. 1921, there was the first British Correspondence Championship. And the same year, then the 11th World Championship. And here Capablanca won against Lasker in Havana, Cuba by 5-9 points. 1924, the International Chess Federation, FIDE, that means Fédération Internationale des Échecs, was founded in Paris. But it based in Lucerne since 1924. The Olympic Games, which were carried out in Paris, gave cause for that. There were 159 national associations with their over 5 million members, which joined together there. And in the same year, 1924, FIDE adopted officially the Stanton Chessman set. In 1927, there was the first Chess Olympiad. It took place in London. In the same year, 1927, the 12th World Championship took place. There, Alexander Aljochin became the 4th official world champion. He defeated Capablanca by a score of 3-6, and they played in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Then 1929, the 13th World Championship. It was played in several cities in Germany and the Netherlands. Aljochin defended his title against Bogolyubov by 15.5 to 9.5 points. Then in 1934 we have the 14th World Championship. It was carried out in several German cities. Aljochin defended his title against Bogolyubov, and the score was 15.5 to 10.5 points. Then next year we have the 15th World Championship. Max Euwe, Netherlands, became the 5th official world champion. He could win against Aljochin in Zandvoort, the Netherlands, by a very narrow result with 14.5 to 15.5 points. Here we have a picture of Euwe, Netherlands. He lived from 1901 to 1981. Then 1937, the 16th World Championship. Aljochin got his title back from Euwe in the Netherlands. The score was 9.5 to 15.5 points. Then 1937, there was the oldest known simultaneous blindfold match. It was carried out with 34 participants. In 1941, Reuben Fine published his book Basic Chess Endings. Then 1945, that was the first international sports event after the Second World War. It was a match between the USA and the Soviet Union. It was carried out by radio. The Soviet Union was the clear winner Then in 1946, Aljochin died. 1947, there was the very first stamp with a chess motif. It was issued in Bulgaria. Yeah, that was a white knife on a brown background. In 1984 then, we have the 17th World Championship, and that was the first championship under the control of FIDE. And here Mikhail Botvinnik became the 6th official world champion. Yeah, the competition took place in The Hague, Netherlands, and Moscow. There, 5 leading chess players, Botvinnik, Smyslov, Keres, Reshevsky, and Juve, played in a round-robin tournament. And the winner then was Botvinnik, and so Botvinnik was the new world champion then. Here we have a picture of Botvinnik. Yes, first USSR, then later Russia. He lived from 1911 to 1995. It's a picture of the Dutch National Archives, The Hague. Then 1950, the titles International Grandmaster, GM, and International Master, IM, were introduced by the FIDE. And the same year then, we have the first candidates tournament. It took place in Budapest. The winner was David Bronstein. Yeah, at last he won against Isaac Boleslavsky. And yeah, we are now after the Second World War. Here some recognize that there is a tendency to mistake free play in chess. And so some predicted a draw death in chess. FIDE was thinking of some rule changes. For example, an alteration of the starting position of the pieces. Or they were thinking of a cancellation of castling. Now we come to the second half of the 20th century. In 1951 there was the 18th World Championship. David Bronstein was the challenger of Botvinnik, and Botvinnik retained his world champion title by a score of 12-12. They played in Moscow. Here we have a picture of David Bronstein. First Soviet Union, then Russia. He lived from 1924 to 2006. And in 1951 there was the first junior chess championship. Then 1952, the Soviet Union won the 10th Chess Olympiad. In 1953, the candidates tournament was won by Vasily Smyslov in Zurich. In 1954, there was the 19th World Championship. It was a match between Botvinnik and the challenger Smyslov. It ended in a draw, 12-12, and so Botvinnik stayed champion. Here we have a picture of Vasily Vasilyevich Smyslov, first Soviet Union, later Russia. He lived from 1921 to 2010. And in 1956, Smyslov again won the candidates tournament in Amsterdam. And then in 1957, the 20th World Championship between Smyslov and Botvinnik. This time Smyslov defeated Botvinnik. They played in Moscow and the score was 9.5 to 12.5 points. And the next year, 1958, the 21st World Championship took place. Botvinnik became the next world champion of FIDE, and he won against Smyslov then by a score of 10.5 to 12.5. We must say that at that point in time the dominance of the Soviet Union emerged in chess. In the Soviet Union there are some chess schools which are supported by the state. We haven't got such a situation in other Western countries, and so because of the support of the state, and Russia is a leading nation then in chess, it's a national sport there. There were then only a few single players who break through the phalanx of the Soviet top players. One of them is Bobby Fischer. In 1958 he became the youngest grandmaster, and so he was qualified for the candidates tournament 1 year later in 1959. Here we have a picture of Fischer. His complete name is Robert James Fischer, USA. He lived from 1943 to 2008. In 1959, Mikhail Tal, Soviet Union, won the candidates tournament that took place in Yugoslavia. Here we have a picture of Mikhail Nekhemyevich Tal. Soviet Union. He lived from 1936 to 1992. Picture is from the Dutch National Archives in The Hague. In 1960, the 22nd World Championship, and there Tal became the official world champion of FIDE then, and he was the youngest one with the age of 23 years. He defeated Botvinnik and they played in Moscow. The score was 8.5 to 12.5. Then next year, the next World Championship, the 23rd one. Now again Botvinnik beat Tal in Moscow by a score 8 to 13. Then 1962 we have Tigran Petrosyan, Soviet Union. He won the candidates tournament, which took place in Curacao. Here we have a picture. Tigran Verdani Petrosyan, Soviet Union. He lived from 1929 to 1984. And then 1963, next World Championship, the 24th one. Petrosyan beat Botvinnik then by a score of 9.5 to 12.5 points. And then we have in 1965 Boris Spassky, Soviet Union again. He won the candidates tournament. Here we have a picture. Boris Vasilyevich Spassky, first Soviet Union, later Russia. He lived from 1937 to 2025. And so we have in 1966 the 25th World Championship between Petrosyan and Spassky. Petrosyan stayed the world champion by a score of 12.5 to 11.5 points. They played in Moscow. Then in 1967 we have now Bent Larsen, another player which break into the phalanx of the Soviet players. He comes from Denmark. He won the Zeus Interzonal Tournament and the first chess Oscar. In the heyday of Fischer, Larsen was another player who taught the Soviet masters fear. He especially impressed by his treatment of endgames. Here we have a picture of Jørgen Bent Larsen, Denmark. He lived from 1935 to 2010. In 1969, next World Championship, the 26th one, Spassky became the 10th official world champion against Petrosyan. They played in Moscow and the score was 10.5 to 12.5. And then 1970, now Fischer was the winner of the Palma de Mallorca Interzonal Tournament. And though in 1971, Fischer was also the clear winner of the candidates tournament. And that meant that in 1972 he was the challenger of Spassky in the 27th World Championship. Yes, they played in Reykjavik, Iceland, the capital of Iceland. The score was 8.5 to 12.5, and so Fischer became the new world champion. That was after a long time that another player interrupted the series of Soviet world champions. And it was the so-called match of the century. Then 1975, next world championship. But the world championship in that year did not take place because Fischer did not compete, and Anatoly Karpov, Soviet Union, would have been the challenger of Fischer. What did FIDE do? They declared Karpov to the new world champion, 12th world champion, at the green table. No match was played. Here we have a picture of Anatoly Yevgenyevich Karpov. Again first Soviet Union, later Russia. He was born in 1951. He is still alive. In 1977, the female Nonna Gabrindashvili, Soviet Union, won the tournament in Lone Pine. 1 year later, in 1978, she was the first woman who became a FIDE Grandmaster. Here we have a picture. First Soviet Union, then later Georgia. She was born in 1941. And in 1978, FIDE introduced another title, the so-called FIDE Master title, FN. In the same year, 78, the 28th World Championship took place. Viktor Korchnoi was the challenger of Karpov. Karpov defended his title in Baguio, Philippines, by a score of 6 to 5 points. Here we have to recognize that in that score the draws are not included. These are only winning or losing games here. Here we have a picture of Viktor Korchnoi, or Viktor Lvovich Korchnoi. First Russia, then Soviet Union, then Switzerland. He lived from 1931 to 2016. Then in the same year, the first chess software for personal computers was introduced. It was Sargon at the West Coast Computer Fair. Then 1980. Here we have a German player, Dr. Robert Hübner. He was probably the best German player since Lasker. If we compare him with the other world's top players. He reached rank 3 in the world ranking. There was a legendary candidates tournament in 1980. The winner would have been the challenger of Karpov then. They would play then in Meran, Switzerland. Hübner was already in the lead. Then, in the 7th game, Hübner overlooked a knight fork in an unforced situation in the end game. He lost his rook, and so the candidates tournament against Korchnoi. And so Korchnoi again played against Karpov. Here we have a picture of Robert Hübner. Germany. He was born in 1948. He's still alive. Then in 1981, the 29th World Championship. Here again, Karpov played against Viktor Korchnoi. They played in Meran. The result was 6-2 for Karpov. So Karpov stayed the world's champion. Then the next World Championship from 1984 to 1985. They played over the New Year's Day. And yeah, we have the 30th World Championship. And here, Garry Kasparov, Soviet Union, was the challenger of Karpov. Yeah, and here the FIDE president abandoned the match after 84 games without an end result. The score was 5-3 with Karpov in lead. And yeah, here we have a picture of Garry Kemovich Kasparov. Yeah, first Soviet Union, then Russia. He was born in 1963. Then 1985, the 31st World Championship. Here Kasparov defeated Karpov by a score of 11-13. They played in Moscow. And so Kasparov became the 13th official FIDE World Champion. Yeah, by the way, in 1986 there was a premiere of the musical Chess that was in the London West End. In 1986, 32nd World Championship, yeah, again Kasparov played against Karpov. Kasparov retained his world champion title. They played in London and St. Petersburg. The score was 12.5 to 11.5. Then 1987, the 33rd World Championship. Here again Kasparov retained his world champion title against Karpov. They played in Seville, Spain. Kasparov could defend his title with a very, very close result. Kasparov had to win the very last game, and he did win, and so there was a draw of 12 points. Then in 1990, 34th World Championship. This time, again, Kasparov retained his world champion title against Karpov. They played in New York and Lyon, France, and the score was 12.5 to 11.5. Then 1991, Judith Polgar, Hungary, became the youngest grandmaster. Yeah, and here she was 1 month younger than Bobby Fischer. Here we have a picture. Yeah, Hungary. She was born in 1963. In 1992, there was a memorial match. Fischer again played against Spassky in Yugoslavia. Here again, Fischer was the winner. In 1993, Garry Kasparov, together with Nigel Short, they founded the Professional Chess Association, PCA. And from now on, there were 2 world organizations for chess, FIDE and PCA. So the 35th World Championship of FIDE took place in 1993 and the first World Championship of PCA. Kasparov won against Short in London by a score of 12.5 to 7.5, and so he was a PCA champion. Yeah, here we have a picture of Nigel David Short. He was born in Great Britain in 1965, and FIDE carried out its own championship and revoked Kasparov's title. Then Jan Timman was the challenger of Karpov. Since Juve, we can say Timman was the first Dutch player who reached the very top of the world's ranking. Then in 1993, Timman lost the World Championship match against Karpov with a score of 12.5 to 8.5. Here we have a picture of Jan Timman, the Netherlands. He lived from 1951 to 2026. And then since 1993 there were 2 world champions. One of FIDE and one of PCA. Short won the candidates tournament against Timman by 5.5 to 7.5. In public, we must say the champion of PCA was rather seen as the real world champion. In 1995, there was a second World Championship of PCA. They called it also Classical World Chess Championship. It took place in the World Trade Center in New York. Kasparov won against the challenger Vishwanathan Anand by a score of 10.5 to 7.5 points. Here we have a picture of Anand, India. He was born in 1969. 1996, the 36th World Championship of FIDE. Karpov defended his title and the challenger was Gata Kamsky. The final was in Elista, Russia. The score was 10.5 to 7.5. Here we have a picture of Gata Rustemovich Kamsky. He had first Soviet Union, then USA, and then France. He was born in 1974. And in 1996, the computer Deep Blue won against Kasparov. That was the first victory of a computer against a world champion. Okay, I must say in a single game. The whole match was won by Kasparov by a score of 4 to 2. 1 year later, again computer Deep Blue won a whole match then against Kasparov. And that was the very first victory of a computer against a world champion. And yeah, the development of the chess computers went forward, and nowadays no world chess champion is able to win against the modern chess program. In 1998 there was a 37th World Championship of FIDE, and here we have again Karpov. He played against Anand in Lausanne, Switzerland. They played 6 regular games, then the result was 3 to 3 draw, and then 2 rapid games followed, and they were won by Karpov, and though Karpov defended his title. In 1999, there was a game with Kasparov against the world. That means people could vote for a move by the internet. But Kasparov won. In the same year, 1999, we have the 38th World Championship of FIDE, this time in Las Vegas, USA. There was no challenger for the title defender. It was a classical knockout tournament. And there were only 3 players of the top 15, if we look at the world's ranking at that time. All the actual top players like Kasparov, Karpov, Anand, they did not take part. And though the next world champion of FIDE was Alexander Kalifman, and he was only on position 44 in the world ranking. Here we have a picture of Alexander Valerievich Kalifman, first Soviet Union, later Germany, and then Russia. He was born in 1966. 2000. Here we have the 3rd PCA World Championship. And here Kasparov lost his title against Vladimir Kramnik. The score was 6.5 to 8.5 points. Here we have a picture of Vladimir Borisovich Kramnik, first Soviet Union, later Russia. He was born in 1975. Also in 2000, the 39th World Championship of FIDE took place. Anand won the tournament, which took place in New Delhi, India, and in Tehran, Iran. But here, again, some top players like Kramnik, Kasparov, Karpov, they did not take part. It was again a classical knockout tournament. Karpov, he prepared a lawsuit against FIDE's organization of the World Championship. Now we have still got the early 21st century. In 2001, the FIDE reduced the thinking time for the World Championship. In 2002, Sergei Karyakin, Russia, became the youngest grandmaster. He was 12 years old and 7 months. Here we have a picture of Sergei Alexandrovich Karyakin, Ukraine, later Russia. He was born in 1990. Then in 2002, we have the 40th World Championship of FIDE. It took place in Moscow, Russia. Ruslan Ponomaryov won the tournament. Kramnik and Kasparov did not participate. Here we have a picture of Ponomaryov. Ruslan Oleovich Ponomaryov, Ukraine. He was born in 1983. Then in 2003, Kasparov beat Computer Deep Jr. And in the same year, Kasparov played against X3D Fritz. Yet this match ended in a draw. And yes, those were the very last matches, human against computer, which were not won by a computer. 2004, the 41st World Championship of FIDE. It was carried out in Tripoli, Libya. Rustam Kasimdzhanov became the new FIDE champion. Here we have a picture of him. Uzbekistan, and he was born in 1979. And 2004, we have the 4th Classical World Chess Championship, PCA version. And here Kramnik stayed the world champion. He was playing against Peter Liko from Hungary. They played in Brissago, Switzerland. Here we have a picture of Peter Liko, Hungary. He was born in 1979. Then 2005, we have the 42nd World Championship of FIDE. And here Vasilin Topalov, Bulgaria, became the new FIDE World Champion. It took place in Potrero de los Funes, San Luis Province, Argentina. Here we have a picture of Vasilin Alexandrov Topalov. He was born in 1975. 2006, there was a reunification fight between PCA and FIDE, and so there was only one world champion then again. Kramnik and Topalov played against each other, and the PCA world champion, Kramnik, he defeated Topalov in Elista, Kalmykia, Russia. The score was 6-6. Then they played a tie-break with rapid chess games. And so Kramnik won that tie-break and became the next world champion, the only world champion then. 2007, the 43rd World Championship of FIDE. Anand became the 15th official FIDE World Champion. They played in Mexico City. It was an 8-player double round-robin tournament. Anand reached 9 points out of 14 and stayed undefeated. Then there was a break-up of the Soviet Union into the former countries. So besides Russia, there were other countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, and so on. And so a great number of players of the former Soviet Union played for other countries. For example, Korchnoi played for Switzerland, Gelfand for Israel, and Milov for Switzerland, Krysenkov for Poland, and Yusupov for Germany, and so on. 2008, the 44th World Championship of FIDE. Anand stayed the world champion. He played against Kramnik in Bonn, Germany. The score was 6.5 to 4.5 points. 2009, Kasparov and Karpov played a memorial match. They played in Spain, Valencia. That was 25 years after their world championship fight in 1984. The winner was Kasparov with a score of 9-3. 2010, the 45th World Championship of FIDE. Anand again stayed the world champion. He played against Topalov in Sofia, Bulgaria. The score was 6.5 to 5.5. In 2011, Boris Gelfand, Israel, won the candidates tournament. And in 2012, Carlsen reached an ELO number of 2,861. That's a new record. That was 10 points higher than Kasparov's 2,851. In 2012, we have the 46th World Championship of FIDE. Anand played against Gelfand. They played in Moscow, Russia, and the score was 6-6, and then in the tiebreak 2.5 to 1.5 points. Here we have a picture of Boris Abramovich Gelfand. First USSR, then Belarus, and then Israel. He was born in 1968. Then 2013, the 47th World Championship of FIDE. Here Magnus Carlsen became the world champion. He played against Anand in Chennai, India. The score was 3.5 to 6.5. Here we have a picture of Sven Magnus Owen Carlsen, Norway. He was born in 1990. Then 2014, Carlsen reached with 2,882 a new ELO record. Then 2014, Anand won the candidates tournament in Khanty-Mansiysk, Russia. And in the same year, the 48th World Championship of FIDE took place. And here Carlsen stayed the world champion against Anand. They played in Sochi, Russia. The score was 6.5 to 4.5 points. In 2016, Karyakin won the candidates tournament. The same year, the 49th World Championship took place. Carlsen again stayed the world champion. They played in New York City. The score was 6-6, and then in the tiebreak, Carlsen won with a score of 3-1. There were 4 rapid games. 2018, we have the 50th World Championship. Again, Carlsen stayed the world champion. He played against Caruana in London. Here we have a picture of Fabiano Luigi Caruana. First USA, then Italy. He was born in 1992. In 2020, there was a COVID-19 pandemic. That was a great impact to the chess scene. Many events must be cancelled, like in other kinds of sport. Then 2021, Abhimanyu Mishra, USA, became the youngest grandmaster. He was only in the age of 12 years and 4 months. The same year, we have the 51st World Championship. Again, Carlsen could defend his title, this time against Ian Nepomniachtchi, Russia. They played in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The score was 7.5 to 3.5. Here we have a picture of Ian Alexandrovich Nepomniachtchi, first USSR, then Russia. He was born in 1990. Okay, this is the source of the last picture. And then 2022, Carlsen announces that he will not defend his title as a world champion. And so in 2023, the 52nd World Championship took place. without Carlsen. He did not compete. And so Ian Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren, they were the first and the second in the candidates tournament. So they played against each other in Astana, Kazakhstan. And there Ding Liren became the new world champion. He won by a score of first 7-7 draw, and then in the rapid games 1.5 to 2.5 points. Here we have a picture of Ding Liren, China. He was born in 1992. Then 2024, we have the 53rd World Championship. Here Gukesh Domarachu became the youngest world champion with the age of 18. Yeah, he won against Liren. They played in Singapore. The score was 6.5 to 7.5 points. Here we have a picture of Gukesh Domarachu, India. He was born in 2006. Then in 2026, the 54th World Championship would take place, and the winner of the candidates tournament will be the challenger of Domarachu then.
Now we finished lecture 1. Next time in lecture 2 we will talk about the rules of the game. Now thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.